Hello, class. Welcome to our discussion on essay number 3. I have a list here of everybody's proposal topics. So this video is kind of done on the fly, right in the middle of the week here. I'm going to leave it up all through next week as well, so that as you're constructing the essay, it'll kind of be like your notes, if you would, from class to come back to. I was just cooking it up, so hence the bandana. Don't want to get any food in the breakfast sandwiches. Which, by the way, if any of you have not discovered the joy of the Amoroso roll, Ameroso, they're so delicious. They make any sandwich taste better. Amoroso, they're made in Philadelphia, and you can get them at most grocery stores. Very tasty. But that's just a little welcome to the lecture, sharing with you just as if in the classroom we're human beings, we talk about life. Um, the point of the amoroso is instead of saying breakfast roll, I substitute the term amoroso, right? Because that's the name of the roll. When you substitute one idea for another, the figure of speech is metonymy for emphasis. So what I'm substituting is not that we're just having a breakfast sandwich on any roll, we're having it specifically on an amoroso. So again, kind of relate that back to a figure of speech. Remember, when you substitute a nickname, that's a specific type of metonymy called antonomasia. Claudius calls himself the Dane, right? He's the man in Denmark, right? So it's more of a respect thing. So anyway, on to our discussion of essay 3. You should be thinking about figures of speech as you're analyzing your fictional sources. Remember, everything we do in this class is writing about literature. So, what do we need to do? You need to figure out what fictional characters you want to write about. Essentially, this is a character analysis, right? I mean, you're looking at all of these words are going to be looking at ideas or concepts in your fictional sources, and ideally, right, you want to relate that back to the abstract term that you choose, right? The term is abstract because people don't agree on the definitions, right? Start with the idea of what do you want to write about? Do you want to write about identity? That's kind of a no brainer. And quite a few of you are writing about identity. And the people who chose identity, Paper Towns, right? Macbeth, Hamlet, Joy Luck Club. All of those, you're going to be focusing on the characters. Now, what do we all agree with? We all agree that identities are malleable, they can change. The question that we don't agree on is how do you change your identity? Do you lie, cheat, and steal to get ahead? Right? Pathos, because we all know that's not a logical thing to do. Or do you use logos? Right? One of the email replies that I've been giving people, if you got me your proposal, you got an email reply from me. And a lot of people, I kept bringing everything back to this idea of hubris, right? I said in a lot of the replies, it may help to, this is one of them, it may help to focus on how hubris, pathos, and hidden assumptions are strategies that fuel illogical behavior, right? Hubris, arrogance, emotions, people doing what they want because they want to, regardless of whether it's logical. Okay, so let's look at identity. Claudius, he changes identity illogically, right? He murders his brother to become the king. So logically, he improves his standing because he becomes the king. So people say, oh, yeah, he did. But again, the steps that he takes to do that are not logical. Therefore, we see when hubris, arrogance, because when you murder someone, you break the law, you're not following the laws of society. It's not logos. When hubris fuels their behavior, it fuels an illogical identity change. There it is, right? That's so identity. We all agree you can change your identity. We just don't agree how. Another term that I think all of you should focus on in this essay, right? Same with Macbeth. Macbeth and Claudius are very similar. They both become king, but unlike Banquo, who says, I'm not going to play foully for it, right? You can compare and contrast Banquo and Macbeth and how they deal with the witch's prophecies, right? Macbeth lets his hubris take over, Banquo focuses more on logos. If you were to look at identity in Hamlet and Claudius as a character and Hamlet as a character, I mean, Hamlet literally pretends to be someone else. He puts on his antic disposition. Is it logical to have multiple personalities, as part of your identity? Well, no. In psychology, they call that multiple personality disorder. Is it logical that Macbeth's identity is dependent on approval from his wife? No. In psychology, they call that codependence. So you might look at identity and turn this into a psychological analysis to better understand codependence, to better understand um, insanity or mental illness. Remember, Hamlet, would he be found guilty for the insanity defense? Would Macbeth be found guilty if he claimed it was a crime of passion, or would they both be found innocent, Hamlet by insanity, Macbeth by a crime of passion? He's got a lot going on with identity. Um, Remember, reading and writing about literature, right? Compare and contrast. So we had a little paragraph on analysis for paper one, a paragraph on explication for paper two. You got a paragraph on compare and contrast for paper three. Essentially, right? Emphasize the similarities, emphasize the differences. When you're looking at the differences, right? When you're looking at multiple perspectives, you're engaging in dialectical thinking, right? Remember, logos, Occam's razor, dialectical thinking, concessions, Rogerian strategy, refutation. Those are all strategies to help enhance the logos of your argument. When you're looking at characters that make rational decisions, consider philosophical counseling on page 60 of this book. Use the quote about philosophical counseling as a source in your paper for those of you who are analyzing illogical decisions made by characters, fueled by hubris, irrational emotions, and hidden assumptions. A new kind of therapy called philosophical counseling is based on the belief that many personal problems stem from faulty logic, from irrational assumptions. Right? Elliot D. Cohen teaches his clients critical thinking skills so that they can identify and correct such damaging assumptions. Right? Philosophical thinking, page 60. Occam's razor, I think it's page 60. Why can't I find it? But you all know what page Occam's razor is on, I hope, right? At this point, I don't have the terms list in front of me, forgive me. But right, hidden assumptions, dangers of hidden assumptions. Anyway, Occam's razor. It's in chapter 3. Forgive me that I can't find the page. This will give you a moment to pause, have a sip of your beverage. Occam's razor, 58. Right, so philosophical counseling's on page 60. Occam's razor's on page 58. If you're writing about identity, right, use those. Essentially, remember, this is a critical thinking paper. So I think all of you should be focusing on when characters make illogical decisions. Again, hidden assumptions, irrational emotions, hubris, right? They don't use Occam's razor. They focus more on pathos than logos, logical decisions, logos, using Occam's razor, using Rogerian strategy and having empathy, making concessions before making refutations, right? Philosophical counseling, basing one's decisions on facts and logic. And I think Hamlet's a really interesting character because he's so logical in the first half of the play and so fueled by hubris in the second half. And remember, focus on the ideas and compare and contrast, right? And then you have some examples of the sample student essays. Remember, we're done with this book after this week's readings, right? You had the sample research paper, you had the section on writing a research paper and gathering sources, because some of you might choose to get sources from something other than the library database. That's fine. Remember, you can get sources on your issue. So if you're writing about identity, you can get sources on identity, psychological journals, or ideas about people's identity, things like that. Second, you can get sources on your author. Whenever you click on the library database and you go to my favorite database, Literature Resource Center, and you type in identity, you type in any one of these words on the list on page 117, and the most articles by author about are all William Shakespeare. Click on Shakespeare, then the titles of the plays come up. You can click on the play specifically you're writing about, or, right, you could type in the search, limit the search, right? Identity Shakespeare, then you type in maybe the character's name, Lady Macbeth or Macbeth, right? Or you can click on it. So again, hopefully you get lucky, you get all three: identity, Shakespeare, Macbeth. But if you just get identity and Shakespeare, that's fine too. You can take a source about something that Romeo does, and you can apply it to an illogical decision by Hamlet. You could take a source on Shakespeare that says Shakespeare has a lot of tragic characters who are fueled by hubris. It doesn't have to be specific, and you can apply it to your analysis. And lastly, you could take a source about identity, about greed and how it affects someone, or power, right, and apply it to your paper. So I'm at 10 minutes. I'm going to stop here, but I'm going to get right back on it, and I'm going to go through the rest of your terms. So if you wrote about identity or you're writing about identity, you should be feeling confident, hopefully, right? Again, this paper is an analysis. You're going to focus on the elements of fiction. So in your intro, background on your issue. So if you're writing about identity, start with ideas like worldview, connotations, denotations, include a dictionary definition, right? Maybe start with an anecdote or a description or example. That's just for identity. Then give background on your fiction. Who's the author? What are the titles? Who are the characters you're going to write about? Then your thesis should answer the claim. Answer the question, make the claim. What do we learn about blank, your issue? What do we learn about identity by analyzing Hamlet? Fair enough, or whatever your fiction is. And then your supporting sentence lists the elements of fiction by focusing on plot, character, style, and specific figures of speech. Readers can better understand that when hubris fuels a character's identity change, the results are negative both for that character and those around them. Something like that. All right, enough of me. I'll pick up right away with courage, depression, cult, and addiction, the other terms that people were writing about. Stay tuned.